Welcome to Tate Britain, a treasure trove bursting with masterpieces.
Right, we're going to have a good time.
And home to the National Collection of British Art.
Made me cry.
I'm Gus Casely-Hayford. As an art curator and a cultural historian, I've been lucky enough to work with some of the finest institutions in the country. But this series is pretty special. With unique access to Tate Britain,
There must be thousands of pictures.
there are. I'm going to take you on a journey into the scenes of some of the nation's most loved landscape paintings. Look at that. And I'm not alone,
I am now straddling two countries.
because I'm going to be joined by some of the finest showmen and showwomen.
I played about 10 characters, including a horse, naked.
Don't try this at home.
We'll walk in the artist's footsteps, rediscovering their secrets and their inspirational views.
This is it.
Some as if the artist just left them,
Rowing into history.
and others completely transformed.
This is the Hogarth roundabout.
This is the actual site where the three miners probably sat.
Like they were waiting for a bus.
Exactly.
So sit back and enjoy the view, or better still, follow in my footsteps.
Oh, bugger it. Why was I born so short?
Today, I want you to join me on a journey into the world of one of our most loved, but also strangely, most underrated artists, John Constable. He's one of our great romantic painters. His cosy scenes of rural life, the quintessence of Englishness. But he's also known as the chocolate box artist. His work criticised for being twee or even dull. But I want to show you the hidden side of the man, the rebel, the outsider who changed the course of art history. And who better to join me than an actor and a national treasure, Richard E. Grant. Born in Swaziland, he's made a career playing the outsider and the ultimate English gent. Two outsiders, one sense of Englishness. It's going to be an interesting journey.
Gus,
Ah, Richard.
how are you?
Yes,
Thank you.
gorgeous day for it.
Yeah, really good. In we go.
I do love this gallery. You look at the work and it tells you something about, empire. You get the sense of this is a nation that, with balls, and that we needed to kind of show it. And we show it in images, Shakespeare writ large, the idea of, of the kind of dandy,
Hardly camp at all. Sort of ancestor of Margaret Rutherford. So, what is the irony of this? That you are originally from Ghana, I'm from Swaziland, and we are here. But you were born here, I was born there, in the last gasp of empire.
But I think that is the wonderful kind of irony of it, isn't it? That, that we are now both, in different ways, British. John Constable was also a child of empire. Born in 1776, the Industrial Revolution was sweeping through the landscape. And Constable, who was a country boy at heart, sentimentalized all he saw changing before him. Over here is a painting that he created at the beginning of his career. Constable's father's mill in Suffolk. He painted this aged 40 before he left the family home for good.
But it's extraordinary to me that he lived, his lifespan was right during the Industrial Revolution.
Yes.
And yet there's this idyll of rural English landscape that is...
But in a way, it's pretense. I mean, this is the River Stour or Stour, and it's got locks on it. It's actually been...
Industrialised.
Industrialised, exactly.
To me, it looks absolutely still idyllic, and it doesn't conjure up, the dark satanic mills. Excuse me a moment, I'm never going to have this opportunity without the guards.
You're going to get
doing
us thrown out.
Don't touch. You see, there is a guard. Sorry, let's cut that out. Back to the serious work.
Decorum.
So this is not a sort of imagined construct. This is how it was. That is the mill, that's the river, and the locks as you've described it.
Yes.
So is this all gone?
No, this is all there.
So it's not Barrett's home now?
That's still standing just as it is there. And, you know, we can step into that landscape and rediscover it. Let's go. Dedham Vale, on the Essex-Suffolk border, Constable's homeland. It's all ancient woodlands, meadows, and ever-changing skies. Our first walk follows the banks of the River Stour, a landscape unchanged since Constable's day. Starting at Dedham Boathouse, through some of the most iconic English landscapes imaginable, and ending at our painting, Flatford Mill, navigable by river apparently. Richard and I are going to cheat a little bit, and instead of walking, we're going to row the 1.5 miles right into the heart of our painting.
Experienced rower. Right, climb aboard.
And my dashing skipper, Mr. Richard E. Grant.
You have to go beyond me there so you can be leaning back. If I fall in now... Ta-da! Right. Where are we off to? Going the wrong way? Which way?
The other way.
This way?
Yes.
Oh, this is the life. Being rowed by Richard E. Grant. I didn't think of you as someone who would be rowing. I saw you as a kind
Sitting
of...
in a smoking jacket.
Yes, very urban, kind of, you know, sort of with a kind of a long cigarette holder, kind of talking about existentialism or something.
Oh, I can do that. I'll do that. Now shush and look at that.
No, that is exquisite, isn't it?
Absolutely beautiful. Vast amounts of sky.
Constable was spellbound by the world he grew up in. These were the views that turned an ordinary boy into a painter. And he returned to the River Stour time and time again in his art. It's here I want to talk to Richard about Constable's vision of Englishness and how it compares to his. I'm an urban boy. I mean, I travel outside of London and I feel like I'm going to have a nosebleed. But
Do you?
I mean, it's beautiful and I love it here. But my sense of Britishness is kind of a little bit more sort of smoke-filled streets. I mean, what's your idea of Britishness? Is it?
When you fly over the landscape, it's embroidered and patchworked in a way that no other country that I've ever been to quite has. So there's a sense of order and, I don't know, visual calm about it that I think is quintessential to my sense of what Constable has imprinted on the national psyche. And that it's still here is tangible, and you can, you know, as we're doing, row through the landscape that was here 200 years ago. And I think that appeals to us at some deep level.
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can I ask you what you think of John Constable? You think it's fantastic. Why?
Well, if you look at his paintings, the skies that he creates in the paintings,
Yeah.
you see those skies all the time around here. That kind of build-up of cloud.
Well, you've been very helpful. Thank you.
You've been very helpful.
Bye.
As we approach the end of our first journey, we reach Flatford Mill. Far more than an English idyll, his painting was a love letter to the landscape he grew up in and the nostalgia he felt about later leaving it behind.
This is Flatford Mill.
Yes, this is Flatford Mill. So we are right in the heart of Constable country.
Rowing into history.
And is this Dave?
Yes, it is. Good morning.
Morning.
Morning, Dave.
Dave Piper is the head ranger with the National Trust, and it's his job to maintain Constable's views.
Which is amazing. We were just talking about this coming down here. When you're in this landscape, it looks exactly like the paintings.
Exactly.
It's not made up or sort of Disney-fied. This is it.
This is it. We're not trying to fossilise the landscape. We've tried to adapt with it. So yes, some of the paintings do look slightly different, but we've done that because it suits the landscape we've got today. So this is that view you were looking at. The canoe you can see parked up. That's where in the painting you have the two lighters.
Oh, I see, yes. Wow, that is
it.
our Flatford Mill frame. What do you think, Richard?
I love it.
This is where the great man actually stood, sat, and gazed on this scene and thought, this is really worth capturing. I've not been to a place that is so tangibly an artist's canvas.
There's a lock.
Yeah.
It's in the painting.
Yes, that is the lock.
The lock.
So come, poke your nose around the place and uncover its stories with us. And with the ever-inquisitive Richard, you're going to see a different side to these views.
Is there an outdoor sex area?
Probably, but I'm not privy to where that is.
Right, okay.
Richard E. Grant and I are here in Flatford, Suffolk, on John Constable's trail. In this tiny hamlet, there are 9 Constable scenes, which is why over 250,000 people pay homage each year to walk and to sketch his views.
Let's go and catch those old ladies.
And Richard is a little overexcited to be here.
Oh, come on. Hello, ladies. Can we ask you what you think about Constable? Because Gus is the expert, so what do you think?
It's our first visit here. We're on holiday for a
you've
few
never
days.
been before?
No.
And could you recognise the scenes from the paintings? Do you think?
A lot of them, but we're still on our way around.
We're in Constable country. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
What do you think of him?
Oh, it's fantastic. I mean...
Why?
Well, just come down here and sort of almost immerse yourself in the pictures. We come twice a week at least paddling.
Every day on the river is different.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
It's just stunning.
Hello, what do you think of Constable? Do you have an opinion?
Oh, you do. Excellent, yeah. Lovely
Excellent.
stuff. Lovely stuff.
So not biscuit tin?
First picture I ever owned was a print of the Wain.
And have you still got it?
Yes.
And what did you like about it particularly?
Oh, it was so English.
So English.
Yeah.
And this is the view they're all queuing up to see.
This is it.
The Wain.
This is it.
Yeah.
That's incredible. That is still exactly as was. The trees are obviously new ones relative to 200 years ago.
But in the right place.
No cart, river's a bit higher.
Yes.
And that would have been field over there,
Yes.
where the trees are now.
Yes. But essentially, it is pretty much...
It's the same.
The same, yes.
Art lover or not, you must be familiar with the Wain. Constable's perfect vision of England has been immortalised on countless chocolate boxes and biscuit tins.
He didn't actually paint it here, that he obviously loved it so much that when he relocated to London, this was one of the scenes that he wanted to recreate. So
it's from memory?
It is from memory.
And yet it's still, it recognisably looks like this.
Exactly. And he realised that he had to be located in London if he was going to make it as an artist. But spiritually, this is where I think he felt that he wanted to be.
Oh, he's got the picture. I'm going to ask him. Can I ask you a big favour?
Yeah.
Can we stand with your picture here and say then and now?
Just 2 miles from that famous Wain view is East Berkhold. And for our second walk, Richard and I are going to take you on a journey into Constable's boyhood. Beginning in the heart of the village, past his childhood home, the church where he fell in love, and then his walk to school along the banks of the River Stour. This was the landscape which was set to completely transform him. and will end at his school in Dedham, over 2 miles in the footsteps of the artist. Constable was born into a wealthy middle-class family. One of 6 children, he was due to inherit the family mill. But like most teenage boys, he rebelled. Turning his back on the family business, he fell in love with painting instead.
This was the family house was up here.
And it's still standing?
I mean, the family house was knocked down around 1840. I think there are some stable buildings that are still on the site, but I'm not sure what is there now.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Burcott House, childhood home of John Constable. So this is where he lived, and now it looks like a Barrett's new build.
You know, I think it's good that we embrace the present and that, you know, we don't want to hold whole communities in aspic. But this is a little bit disappointing. I mean, this is the birthplace of the great man.
Aged 23, Constable left the family home for the first time and joined the Royal Academy in London to train as an artist. But his heart was in Suffolk, and it was a woman he returned for.
So what's the significance of this church?
And this is St. Mary's the Virgin in East Bergholt.
Just moments from Constable's former home is his childhood church. This painting was one of the first works Constable ever exhibited, and this church was absolutely pivotal in his life.
Constable's love of his life, Maria Bicknell, her grandfather is the rector here. He's very wealthy, very influential, but he doesn't like the Constables.
Why?
And he thinks they're a little bit beneath him, and he knows John is an artist, and he thinks he's never, ever going to be able to provide for my granddaughter.
I'm not surprised the old rector was twitchy. Constable was 20 years older than Maria. So for 7 years they dated in secret, until 1817 when his father died. He inherited enough money to marry Maria. Her family refused to attend. John and Maria may not have been able to marry here, but his parents are buried in a secluded corner, still a much visited spot.
A classical-looking tombstone in a corner that is forever England.
So there we go, Golding Constable. Golding, he was a big man up here. Even though he wasn't big enough for the in-laws, he was respected. And I think John Constable didn't feel like that kind of archetype, that he wanted to plough his own furrow. I mean, did your father have very particular thoughts about what Richard would be, what kind of man that you'd be?
Certainly not an actor.
Really?
Yeah. Makeup, men in tights and buggery was his estimation of what my profession was.
The year after he married Maria, Constable left Suffolk for good. But this place never left him, so if you want to get to know the artist, you really need to know what influenced the boy. So Richard and I are going to follow the route that John Constable would have taken every day to school. It's these views that had a transformative effect on the young Constable.
Wow, what a view that is.
Isn't that glorious?
So this is...
So he captures this church at Dedham. Whilst he's living here, he accepts that he's living somewhere which is absolutely exquisite, and he sees his art as being his way of celebrating the beauty of his surroundings.
These warm baths of English loveliness might appear cosy and sedate, but John Constable's work was revolutionary. When the art world was obsessed with scenes of pomp and grandeur, even Constable's hero Gainsborough, who grew up 10 miles away, painted these landscapes but had to include the aristocracy to sell.
This is down the Dingley Dell. So where would you say that Constable fits in the tradition of English landscape painters?
He does fit within a tradition, but what he does, which is utterly different, is that he makes real the lives of ordinary people through rural landscapes.
So the subject matter, the people in them, are not aristocrats or thoroughbred horses. They are
ordinary,
everyday people.
yes, but they are
not entitled people.
Noble because of what they do and what they're doing in these kinds of landscapes. And these, I think he sees these landscapes as somehow being blessed, that they are kind of a reflection of something that is bigger than us, somehow spiritually bigger than us.
Fair play.
Constable spent hour upon hour out here reflecting on these landscapes. His art was a solitary pursuit that was utterly engrossing, and as a result, he always felt like an outsider to the rest of the world.
Constable was a very sensitive soul. I can slightly relate to that. I feel somewhat like I'm on the periphery of things. I go into a room full of people and I somehow manage to find myself thinking, you know, why am I here? Do I belong? And I think that is something that Constable shares, that he does feel slightly sort of excluded from things. Are you someone who,
So we need to call Dr. Freud for you
We do,
now.
oh God. I think
Have you had analysis?
I'm probably beyond it. I think Freud would
Nobody's
actually
beyond
have a
it.
breakdown actually trying to deal with me. He
Never.
would just think, God almighty.
Never. You can have everything.
And have you had analysis?
Oh yes, goodness me, yeah. Otherwise I wouldn't be standing functioning here talking to you like this now.
And
I got shrunk for 18 months and it saved my life.
Constable once said, "Painting is another word for feeling. I associate my careless boyhood with all that lies on the banks of the Stour. These scenes made me a painter, and I am grateful." Leaving behind the banks of the Stour, we end our walk in Dedham village. It's all the more poignant knowing that this is the last time that Constable was truly happy.
How much further, Dad? This is it?
Yeah, this is the school.
John Constable school days.
Constable moved here after a spell at a tyrannical boarding school. His headmaster, Reverend Grimwood, was kinder. He indulged Constable in his sketches, even if they weren't quite what he had in mind. So it's time to say goodbye to cosy chocolate box Suffolk. Next stop, London, where I'm going to show you the darker, melancholic, more brooding side to the man. His world was about to completely transform. Hampstead, North London, my home of 25 years and a postcode I share with the great man Constable. In 1817, Constable and Maria moved here as newlyweds. She had been cut off by the family inheritance and he had turned his back on a lucrative career. They risked it all, but Constable had only one thing on his mind: becoming a member of the Royal Academy.
Hampstead still remains quintessentially a village. Constable came out here because it must have felt like his native Suffolk. And the thing he loved is that in an hour he could be in the centre of town in his studio.
So before I meet Richard, let me take you on a jaunt around my neighbourhood, Constable's old stomping ground. Beginning in Hampstead's hidden back streets, a place full of artist hideaways, through the acres of woodland that became Constable's outdoor studio, and ending high up on the heath.
This is Well Walk, where the Constable family retreat. And this is one of the happiest chapters of their lives. He comes up here and they take a beautiful house with fantastic views that look out over London. And he has as a neighbour the young Keats and their family. You can probably see just across the road with the blue door, that's where John Constable and his family move in. And they move into this beautiful street because of the clean water and the clean air up here in Hampstead. But he discovers he's moved in opposite the biggest brothel in the area. So he has to involve the local police and the magistrate in getting them shut down. This is the Vale of Health. It's a beautiful little enclave surrounded by Hampstead Heath. And it's very, very special. It's always been a place of retreat. Keats, Shelley, Byron establish a tradition of this being a kind of bohemian enclave where creativity seems to thrive. And Hampstead is also a constant source of inspiration to Constable. It was a flurry of activity for the artist. He paints numerous scenes here, including this one, the home of the eccentric Admiral Boone in Mary Poppins. It was its quirky facade, based upon a ship that captured the imagination of his children, who called it the Romantic House. But for Constable, it's landscape that is my mistress, he says. And he's gleeful and meticulous in his study of the trees he calls his ladies. This was Constable's laboratory. He didn't just love nature and trees, he would have known every single individual one of them. And it's wonderful to think he probably walked these paths and probably engaged with these specific trees. And he paints them and he draws them with a kind of celebratory love. Constable dragged his canvas out here to paint in the moment, and his tutors at the Royal Academy thought he was barking mad. He was now in his 40s, his work wasn't selling, and Maria had contracted TB, a creeping death sentence in the 18th century. It was at this point he realised he was going to have to do something to win over the Academy. So Constable looked to the traditionalists like Joshua Reynolds and James Barrie, and he went big. He painted his rural scene, but on a giant scale. This is the White Horse, a 6-footer. Finally, success. He was elected an Associate of the Academy. Professionally, Constable was on a high, but his personal life was in turmoil. Maria, weakened from TB and multiple pregnancies, had put Constable into a state of despair. The world around him changed, and the trees which once thrilled him became dark and gnarled. The heath became a Gothic place, full of the shadows of his mind. Constable's paintings always tell us something about his state of mind. And there's an interesting point at which his wife becomes ill, and then when she dies, when he becomes obsessed with dead trees. And there's one particular tree that he paints that has had a copper nail hammered into it. And he paints it as it dies. And it seems to reflect his sense of the impending loss of Maria. In 1828, Maria died, leaving Constable with their 7 children to support. Grief-stricken, he dressed in black for the rest of his life. Always a devout man, Constable looked to the heavens for solace. Clouds became a place of refuge for his raging emotions. This is Hadley Castle, his first sketch after she died. You simply can't escape those brooding, stormy skies. Whilst we might complain about the weather in this country, its wildness and changeability has transformed British art, providing the perfect backdrop for artistic expression. Time to finish our walk and meet some men on the heath. Not a sentence I say very often. Richard E. Grant is with the world's only psychometeorologist, Professor Trevor Harley at the University of Dundee, a man who can tell you everything about weather and its effect on our mood.
People think that if it's sunny, you're going to be happy, and if it's cold and wet, you're going to be miserable. But it's more complicated than that. It depends on personality before.
So do you think this makes a British character very unpredictable?
I think it helps because we're exposed to so much variation in the outside world.
So my having grown up in subtropical country means that I have a very even, predictable character compared to yours, which is quixotic.
Character is determined by many things, but it could be one factor among many, yes.
Okay.
Yes, I do envy you growing up somewhere warm and sunny all the time. It must have an effect on
Well, that's why I have a
people's
sunny
upbringing.
disposition.
Yes, whereas I tend towards misery and changeability. Growing up in Swaziland, you must have had very different sorts of seasons. let
Very
alone
different.
weather.
But what I love about spring and autumn in England is that the differentiation between the seasons is so distinct, and the promise of each of those two seasons in particular are the things that I find very inspiring and delicious in living here.
Do you think Constable had a favourite season for painting?
Well, I think after his wife dies, he gets into his cloud painting in a pretty low period in his life. He then embraces the idea of autumn and winter and those kind of dark, brooding skies.
People who are miserable tend to ruminate more, so it fed his depression.
But he does it obsessively.
Well,
And
exactly.
He paints about 100 cloud paintings up here on the heath on a pretty much kind of consistent basis.
When you're depressed, anxiety goes with depression. Obsessiveness, obsessive compulsive thinking is a form of anxiety. So he was satisfying that obsession and also trying to get round it by just trying to almost purge himself of the misery by looking at the clouds and paint them. And then what he really should have done is find a nice sunny day and paint that. That would have helped his mood more. Paintings would have been less interesting, but it might have been better for his psychological health.
But to truly immerse myself in Constable's skies, I'm returning to Suffolk to do something the artist could only have dreamed of. I'm leaving Richard earthbound, and for me, this will be fulfilling a boyhood dream. My pilot Paul tells me that these are the perfect weather conditions to experience a Constable sky.
Oh, here we go.
Signal's gone, and he opens the throttle. We're in the air.
Oh. That is glorious. Absolutely glorious. Oh! Look at that. And what Constable sought in the clouds was he was trying to commune with God, and you get up here and you understand exactly what that was all about. God and the sky were intimately linked. Looking up into clouds was a way of getting close to nature, getting close to God. And you come up here, and particularly in a glider where there's no sense of there being an engine, and you really do feel, it feels so special, it feels such a privilege.
There we are, cloud.
I can imagine that this would have been Constable's dream to
actually touch the cloud like this, look.
Yeah, to fly through clouds. Look, a rainbow. It's just glorious to see a rainbow, because Constable saw rainbows as they're seen in the Old Testament as being a kind of promise from God that he hadn't forgotten us. And Constable wrote, "I am the man of clouds."
It's genuinely, this is one of the most beautiful things that I've ever seen or ever done. And thank you, Paul, because I was pretty terrified, to be honest, but I've absolutely adored it. Over 100 miles from Constable's birthplace in Suffolk lies Salisbury, the setting for the final chapter in Constable's life. There's something really special I want to show you, the culmination of his life's work in one truly epic painting. Our fourth walk begins at the cathedral with the tallest spire in Britain, past the home of his best friend, through the very heart of his paintings and ending in the water meadows, still lush and unspoilt as they were 200 years ago. Constable came to Salisbury throughout his life to visit his friend Bishop John Fisher. But in 1830, in the trip after Maria's death, he created one of his most dramatic paintings. For years it belonged in a private collection, but in 2013 it was bought by the nation, and now on tour it's here. It's come home to the Salisbury Museum. At over 6 foot, it's quite the showstopper. This is Constable's Salisbury Cathedral from the Meadows. Many people have said that this is John Constable's greatest painting, and you can see why. It's got the constituent parts of just about every other major painting that he creates. The Wain reminiscent in this carriage moving through the water, the dog looking backward, reminiscent of the figures in the corner of Hadley Castle. You can see Hampstead Heath and all of those glorious landscapes that he painted with rainbows, those skies across East Bergholt and Suffolk and Hampstead. And Flatford, where we began, this is an artist who in his life didn't get acknowledgement, but it's wonderful that in his death that he has found a place that I think is rightfully his. It's a wonderful thing. Where the rainbow touches the ground is the home of Bishop John Fisher's nephew, the place where Constable stayed whenever he was in Salisbury. Constable saw this place as an emotional font where he could seek replenishment. The bishop commissioned this painting. That's him and his daughter in the corner. The view is almost picture perfect today, and that's the amazing thing about this city. His landscapes are everywhere. Literally minutes after seeing Constable's great masterpiece, our walk brings us here to the water meadows, straight into his canvas. So there it is, Salisbury Cathedral from the meadow. And this is where the great man stood, sat to paint that magnificent canvas. And he dragged that huge 6 foot thing down here to make sure that he could capture that view in all of its majesty. He wanted to make sure that we understood not just this scene, but his own sense of grief, of loss, but also of all of this beauty. It's hard to believe that in Constable's lifetime, he sells just 20 paintings in England. The Royal Academy might have sniffed at his work, but the French adored him. He sold more work there than anywhere. When he exhibited the Wain in Paris, it was completely revolutionary. And the setting for that great painting, Flatford, Suffolk, his spiritual home, and where it's time for one last slice of that quintessential England Constable depicted so well. I like to think that, as melancholic as Constable could be, he might just raise a smile knowing that back in his church, the Suffolk singers continued to celebrate his love of the countryside.
Bravo! Magnificent, magnificent.
Why no words?
Because actually, originally, it didn't have any text. I think possibly it was even a piano duet. That's how I learned Country Gardens, as a piano duet. So it's just a little sort of percussive party piece.
And it's a kind of quintessence of Englishness, and we're in this environment which is so redolent of England and Constable country. So are you big Constable fans? Are you?
Yeah, I was down at Flatford only a few weeks ago, and it was just fantastic, just going round Willie Lot, and we got there as it opened, and there was nobody else there, and it was just wonderful.
And it's still recognisably the same
totally
place.
recognisable.
Yeah, that's what's amazing about it.
Changed.
You go round there and you just hear the trees and you hear the paintings.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear you sing some more.
Before we bid goodbye to Suffolk, it's time for one last stroll along the River Stour. It was here that Constable dreamed of being an artist, and it was these views that were to inform his life's work.
So you see in Constable his whole autobiography and his sense of inadequacy and unfulfillment, whereas because I didn't know all those details, I don't see that in the pictures.
But I think that is what is fantastic about art, though, isn't it? That you can offer a myriad of different possible interpretations upon a scene.
Devil's advocate, I would take the complete opposite view and say that you are reading that into him. What about the argument of going, this is a man who has stood here with all his troubles that he's had, his inadequacies, and he's going, this is what I'm going to put on a canvas.
Yes.
And in the act of putting it on, that feeling of fulfillment and joy that he might have got out of it, hopefully, is what transmits through the canvas and through the paint to us 2 centuries later.
I think he would have liked what you're saying. In his own words, he felt that he was doing something that was like God's work, that he came out here and he saw in this landscape something that was really, really special. That's why we should get into galleries, get into places like the Tate, and to see those. Don't just read about them in books and take for granted what art historians say, because your reading, everyone's reading, is valid. And I think the reason that Constable chose to paint is because he wanted to demonstrate in spaces like this, there's something for everyone.
Agreed.
I encourage you to come here and immerse yourself in the views that seduced Constable. An ordinary boy who turned his back on convention to pursue a career as a painter. A man who challenged the Royal Academy and yet forced them to accept him. His defiant love of landscape leaves an extraordinary legacy. Manet, Monet, Renoir, they were all inspired by his work, and without him, arguably, there would be no Impressionists. These views are your canvases. Get out here and embrace them, and who knows what you might discover within yourself.